Hello again. My name is JC Basinger. I'm the lead pastor of Hope Community Church. We are a church plant in Queen Creek, Arizona. And it's time for our midweek connection video. Hope you're having a great week thus far. And wanted to bring you up to speed on what we're doing as a church and just a few opportunities to grow in our understanding of worship and also the Christian faith. So we are still in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount as we are looking at living the upside down life. And last week we talked about some hard topics. We talked about lust and anger. And this week is no different. We're going to talk about divorce and integrity in keeping oaths. So we're going to look at the meaning of marriage, the purpose of marriage, and maybe some of the provisions that God has allowed because of the hardness of our hearts. We're also going to look at the importance of keeping our word, of having integrity. As we look at these kingdom ethics, we need to look at God's ideal for the kingdom to come, and that He is calling us as best as we're able by faith in the power of the Spirit, rooted in grace in the gospel, to try to live these kingdom ethics in the here and now, to be the salt and the light God has called us to be as a community, as a church. Now, we have fallen short of this ideal, we fail, and we need to be reminded of God's grace and His mercy as we are reminded of His standard and His ideal for us. We've been talking in the past few videos about the Lord's Supper and its meaning, and I want to talk a little bit more about what it means to remember. Jesus says, do this, as He's giving bread and He's giving wine, do this in remembrance of me. And oftentimes, I think when we think of that, we think of, oh, this is a nice memorial of what Jesus has done. But I think if we think of remembrance in terms of covenant, and even covenant renewal, it deepens the meaning of remembrance. It gives it a fuller, more robust meaning than just remembering that Jesus died for our sins. A covenant is a promise, and God has made promises to His people. He has promised to forgive us for our sins, to cleanse us from all unrighteousness when we confess and profess faith in Jesus Christ. That's why when we celebrate the sacraments of baptism and the Lord's Supper, God in a way is ratifying, is confirming His promises, His promise to cleanse us, the promise to make us clean, His promise to be united with us. And that's what we see going on in the Lord's Supper, that God is ratifying His promise, that as we participate, as we eat the bread and as we drink the wine or grape juice, that God is renewing His promise to us, that He is committed to give us grace and mercy. So I think the Lord's Supper dovetails really nicely with the sermons we've been hearing about Jesus' standard and His kingdom that He's bringing, because we need God's grace as we hear of this high call that He has called His people to live out. And if you're like me, you have failed to live up to the Jesus ethic, to this kingdom ethic. So we need God's grace, and we need the remembrance that God commits to give us that grace in the person and work of Jesus Christ. But it's a two-way covenant. God promises to do things for us, but He also has conditions. And when we hear conditions, sometimes we think, well, that's not grace. Well, there's a difference between what's called a meritorious condition, which means that we do something, and so God owes us, which faith isn't a meritorious condition. And then there's something that's called a necessary condition, and that's what faith is. It's necessary. We need to have faith, but it's not something that we've earned, because faith is a gift given to us by God. Faith is a gift of grace that God has given us, that we have the responsibility to exercise. The Reformers have called faith an instrument, or a means by which we cling to the promises of God in the salvation offered in Jesus Christ. And that's what makes it not a meritorious, but a necessary condition. So in the Lord's Supper, as we renew the covenant, as we remember, we're not only reminded of God's gift of salvation and his grace, but of our act of faith. And as we eat and drink, we are acting in faith and trusting in God's promises. It's now time for our New City Catechism. We're in question 7, which is, what does the law require of God? And here's the answer. Perfect. Rather, personal, perfect, and perpetual, meaning ongoing obedience. That we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbors as ourselves. What God forbids should never be done, and what God commands should always be done. This is why we need grace. This is why we need God's mercy, because that is a bar set so high that none of us can reach to in our own strength. But it's also the bar that Jesus met in his earthly life. And it's because Jesus fulfilled that call, loving God, loving his Father perfectly, and loving his neighbor without blemish, that we can trust in Jesus and we receive his fulfillment of the law on our behalf, so that we can be declared truly righteous, not in something innate and intrinsic to ourselves, but something outside of us, what we refer to as an alien righteousness, or something that's foreign to us. It's the righteousness that Jesus accomplished and gives to us. As we put our faith in him, we receive his righteousness. And that is part of the good news of the gospel, that we are declared righteous. But God continues on, and he, by the power of the Spirit, as we walk in faith, makes us righteous. As we grow in our understanding of who God is, as we grow in our love for him, our faith develops. We depend more and more on our hope, and our love for him deepens. Well, I hope you have a great rest of the week. And for those of you that are in the area, I'd love to see you on Sunday at Hope Community Church. If you're not able to make it, you can always live stream on Facebook Live or YouTube. If you have any questions, would love to interact with you. If you need prayer, send me an email, jc@hopecc.church. Please leave a comment below, like and subscribe to this video. Have a great week. Thanks for watching.